Hi, this is Peter Godinez, your ambassador with KADY TV, with another segment of Good Morning Oxnard. And this is one of the more fun sessions and parts of my job is to have time and quality time with George Miller of Citizens
Journal.
Okay, now that we're going to remember it, so say it one more time.
Citizensjournal.us and Citizens Journal VC on Facebook.
That sounds good. Second time's a charm, I think. But hey, let's get down to it. Lots of information, and I don't want to get in your way, George. So let's
start with a couple of interesting events I'll be talking about today. One is last night's City Council, and there were two very important topics discussed. One was the crime situation in Oxnard and the city and the police department's response to it. And the second would be that the city is finally addressing the bureaucracy connected with getting permits for residential and business purposes. They've done some really revolutionary things. And the third thing, which is somewhat related to the second, is that on Monday night, EDCO and OPIA, which is the Oxnard Plain Industrial Association, held a forum for business owners and executives, which I thought was very important as well. So those would be the three main topics. But first, a couple of quick announcements. First of all, the Earth Day celebration last Saturday at Plaza Park was very well done. There was a wide array of different exhibitors, all the way from the naval base to environmental organizations to master gardeners and things like that. And there were about 5 to 6 other people there, and I thought it was well worthwhile. And this is one of many annual events that they conduct. The second thing is that the first annual Health and Awareness Summit will be held by the Latin American Association at the Elks Lodge tomorrow, April 9th, from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., 801 South A Street, right down the street from Tomas Cafe, where we're broadcasting today.
Walk down the street, shout out to Jessica Gonzalez.
Right, exactly. Well, let's get on to more serious matters. Earlier this week, Police Chief Jerry Williams released a crime report in Oxnard. And basically the bottom line is that crime has gone up 26.2% just in the last year, and nearly doubled in absolute terms since 2011. So she was in the unenviable position of presenting that to the public and explaining what's being done about it. So bottom line, almost all categories of crime increased. A couple that she wanted to sort out and discuss separately. First of all, rapes increased greatly, but most of that increase was due to the definition of how rape is reported as a crime. And she said she didn't want to get into the details, but basically things that were not considered rape now are, which has distorted that number quite a bit. But 45 reported rapes in the city is pretty considerable to worry about. On the good side, murders went down from 15 to 11, which is great unless you're one of those 11 people or their families.
Yes.
And it appears that most of that was gang-related activity, so that was addressed later on in the session. But the problem is that overall crime has gone way up. Now, she did bring out one very important factor, is that Oxnard has by far the highest number of post-release offenders living within its borders. Approximately 217, which is nearly double the next closest, which is Ventura. The other good news is that Oxnard no longer has the highest crime rate in Ventura County. It's now Ventura by a small margin. And they attribute a lot of that to the post-release offender status. And I have had interviews in the past with Assistant Chief Benitez and Assistant Chief Whitney and Commander Sunstergaard, and what they tell me is that there's a relatively small core of criminals that are actually causing most of the offenses. And they're very, very frustrated because they arrest these people continually and send them to the local lockup, and they're released for various reasons later on. And they attribute part of that to the new Proposition 47, which decriminalized a lot of activities and said that people couldn't be held for certain things. In addition, over 40,000 prisoners have been released by a court order because of overcrowding conditions in the state prisons. And the third factor is a large number of illegal immigrant felons have been released for various reasons. So because of demographics and stuff like that, a lot of those people ended up in Oxnard, and we have to contend with that problem. So she outlined several things. She said a lot of things could be done to prevent crime. One of them is awareness. For example, there's a very high number of property crimes in the city. For example, houses, very often garage doors are left open, houses are unlocked, people that don't have alarm systems, neighbors don't cooperate to inform people of situations, and she's working on campaigns to improve all of those things. Quite a few thefts out of cars and thefts of cars themselves, literally well over 1,000 per year. And it's very frustrating that a lot of cars are left unlocked. And a lot of people actually have the habit of starting up and running their cars unattended to warm them up, and sometimes the cars vanish when that happens.
It happens more than you would think.
Right. Another thing they've pointed out is that people tend to talk on cell phones and not pay attention to their surroundings, and are sometimes subject to robberies and other crimes. So awareness is something else. The city has a number of programs to make citizens more aware of all the things I've discussed. In addition, they have something called nextdoor.com, which is sort of an online Facebook system for neighbors to inform each other about what's going on, look for criminal patterns. The police department puts information about crimes and even maps so people can see what's going on and why, and encourages them to report crimes. Now, in Oxnard, a lot of people are hesitant to call the police and report crimes and suspicious things. They're working really hard to build and enhance community trust along that area. So if you'd like to see that report, you can go to Citizens Journal and see the recent crime report that shows a lot of what I'm talking about, but in far more detail on the different crimes and types, but more importantly, on the crime prevention and how to address these crimes. This is a really serious problem that's impacting Oxnard. The next topic I want to talk about is that last night the planning department presented their new 21st century approach, 15 years into the 21st century, on how to address permitting of residential and business applications. I've been at a number of city council meetings and heard all kinds of complaints from business owners, from residents about how hard it is to get things done in Oxnard in terms of getting a new business approved, getting an expansion approved, holding a special event, having a sale, or if you're a resident, doing something as simple as putting a new hot water heater in or a shed. And last month, if you recall, I discussed the new procedure for outside structures, sheds and things like that, which was greatly simplified and costs are reduced quite a bit. But now they've gone much further than that. I'm just going to try to summarize what came up. I'm a retired management consultant myself, and I feel that a lot of the things presented by Planning Director Matt Winiger and Manager Ashley Golden were what I would call world-class customer service concepts. Yeah. These are really state-of-the-art things that they're working on right now, and it was very well received last night. This was only enabled for a couple of different things. I think the main catalyst that set this off was Greg Neidhoff. Mr. Winiger has been there for many years, but for some reason these things did not happen. With Neidhoff coming in, the city council pushing it, and business pushing it, gave enough impetus to break the momentum and get this program moving to what was announced last night. Now, what it involves is setting up what they call a concierge system. They're literally going to have a concierge. So if someone wants to start a business, I am your personal concierge. I will walk you through the process. And that means that I will help you envision what has to be done, set up a list of all the activities that have to happen, and the different approvals that have to be obtained, and also what the costs are, as much as can be determined as possible. And finally, what the timeline is and different milestones which have to be done. Now, you would think this would be done already, but it's not. So this is new. This is coming in. So that's the first different thing. The next thing would be streamlining the fees. Our fees are higher than most other cities for a lot of different business activities, which is actually a detriment. And I can attest to that personally. When we started Citizens Journal, we looked all around and we decided not to headquarter in Oxnard. We headquartered in Moore Park. Care to ask why?
Why Moore Park?
Lowest fees by far.
That's the answer.
It was really simple. I went for the cheapest solution, so we ended up headquartering in Moore Park. The next thing would be is the timetable, which I talked about already. They're also going to be automating a lot more functions. The planning department is participating in the information technology plan, looking at new software that will enable them to do a lot of this stuff online and interactively rather than on paper or in more antiquated computer systems. So When they're finished with this, the average person will be able to look in and see the status of their application, see what the regulations are, actually initiate an application online, and even get some of the approvals online as well, which will reduce the amount of manpower required by the city to do that, but more importantly, the cost and time for a business person or resident seeking to gain city approvals for things that they have to do. This is true not only of businesses, but also residents, and also temporary events. For example, a couple of years ago, I ran an event in Ventura, and I literally walked into Ventura City Hall, and walked out 15 minutes later at only $25 per, had all my approvals, knew what to expect, what I had to do, when I had to do it, and I was able to stage my event at Mission Park across from the Mission. Very, very simple. To do that same thing in Oxnard, it's a little bit more complicated, and they bring it closer to what's happening in Ventura right now.
So your whole cost is $25 for the prior?
That's what it cost me for my permit in Ventura. Okay. Not too bad, right? So look for fees to be more competitive and more automation in the future. That would encompass online access to applications, what are the regulations, the approvals, list of frequently asked questions, so people don't have to do that manually all the time. You can look it up online. Maps, so you know which area you're in, what the zoning is, what applies. Project lists, reduction of required signatures, which I talked about earlier. All that will reduce the runaround. In some cases, people have to receive more than a dozen signatures to get a project approved. But just getting to all the people to get the signatures is a task in itself. And by the way, the city will now accept Visa and MasterCard too. Before
Wow, finally caught up with some technology.
Finally caught up with technology. Now, another thing they did is they co-located the code compliance and service centers so that people are together talking to each other. So you don't have to make as many trips, and these people communicate better. And they're now having weekly plan checker meetings for a couple of reasons: to coordinate activities, to share resources, and also to reduce the inconsistencies done from planner to planner. Some of them have their own little systems, which is a source of huge irritation to business people. It's been mentioned to me numerous times. So they are working actively to address that right now. Another thing they're doing is Treasury is providing online information so you can see business tax information online as well, and automated reports, and they're going to be improving enforcement, which may not be as good for business people. And also tenant improvement permits and simplified solar system permits as well.
That's a big one.
So that's a lot of stuff that they're doing. I mentioned last night that I did respect that they had a lot of world-class principles in there, but the implementation is really where the devil lies, in the details of making all that happen. This is really a good start. They'll also be benchmarking their performance with other cities who are comparable, and also the best practices cities to say, well, how are we doing compared to other cities and what we should be doing? Now, all that very upbeat presentation, by the way, was in great contrast to the EDCO meeting, which was held right across the street on Monday night at the Kitchen, another excellent restaurant, by the way. Elizabeth Callahan, who's the new CEO of EDCO since last July or August, has organized a group called OPIA, which stands for Oxnard Plains Industrial Association. It's a group of industrially oriented companies to get together to share resources and also avail themselves of the talents of Elizabeth and her staff. She has 3 people in her department, by the way. And probably department's not the right word. EDCO is actually a separate, independent, private corporation that's chartered by the city of Oxnard to help business development, business retention, and helping businessmen be more successful through interfacing with the city. So on Monday night, EDCO brought in 14 department heads from Oxnard, and City Manager Nyhoff there, was the main spokesman. We had people from planning, treasury, virtually every department in the city to answer questions and make brief presentations on what they were doing. So the event was really a combination of networking. That was about half the meeting. We all got together and talked, which was very valuable. And then the presentation by EDCO and the city. Now, I'm sorry to tell you that not everything went rosy, and it was not the intention everything to go rosy. One of the intentions was to listen for complaints, and boy, did we get complaints. I mean, I heard some real horror stories. Some of them just didn't need to be. Let me give you an example of one of them. One guy, whose name I won't mention, was trying to expand his parking by 6,500 square feet, which he thought was pretty straightforward. Not so. It turns out there's something called ADA, which stands for Americans Disability It's designed for people who are disabled to help make sure that the facilities make it easier for people to use. So some of the things from ADA make sense. Some of them are just downright insane. For instance, there's a rule that says that a parking lot has to be no more than 2 degrees from the absolute horizontal. Now that would make sense to me in the handicapped parking spaces, but the whole parking lot. And because of the geometry of where everything is, it would cost him a fortune to do that, and he actually did that. But now that he's done it, it actually creates a hazard for the entry of trucks, and it's probably more dangerous than it was before.
Interesting.
So he tried everything he could to work with the city on that, and the city just said, well, ADA is making me do it. And it turns out that you can get waivers for that, but the state regulations are even more stringent, and they couldn't get past that. This guy is still struggling with this even now. Now, not all the problems are with the city. Some of them actually are with the state or federal laws as well. And just to give you an example, one person was very vocal about that, Scotia Alves, who's the owner of Scotia, which is a consumer electronics firm over on Pacific Avenue, said that the city should work with legislators to help head off hostile legislation. And she didn't leave it at that. She actually named names. She actually said there's at least 2 legislators that are making our job much harder. She said, for example, Doss Williams, who's the assemblyman for part of Oxnard and North, voted for every single anti-business bill that came up. And she also said that our congresswoman, no names mentioned, but you'll guess it pretty soon, is rated the last in various congressional evaluations, and people from Santa Monica might regard that as a badge of courage. So this was not complimentary. So she recommended that the city do some pushback and work with the legislators to explain to them how some of these new laws are making it more difficult for California companies to compete and businesses within them. So I thought that bringing out the horror stories was good because people could see it, and the city was taking notes, and they obviously are incorporating these complaints into what they're doing. So I asked Greg Nyhoff last night, I said, well, why didn't you guys mention all the stuff you're doing at the meeting on Monday? It would have gone a lot smoother. He said, we were there to listen, we really weren't sure what to expect, but yes. So that's the bottom line of that. So I do see some real progress that's being made at this point. I'm more hopeful than I've been in a long time.
You know, I'm encouraged to hear that, and again, just to do a bit of a shout out, because I was not at the council meeting, but at the town hall meeting on Monday.
Yes.
And I was looking forward to hearing your aspect of it. But, you know, when you look at Greg Nyhoff, you look at Police Chief Williams, Elizabeth, just all the talent. And I think there's a degree of some accountability, an expectation of performance in Greg's staff. I see an opportunity to collaborate, honest feedback. And I always like to talk that the solution is not in our heads right now. But if we keep on talking, and we start connecting people, business communities, and I couldn't help but just think that there's so many connecting pieces, George, and I could not explain it, but if certain people connect, people are allowed to collaborate, prioritize, you know, I share your sense of, hey, you know, there's hope and there's something good that's going to happen.
I felt the city didn't come close to presenting what they've actually been doing.
Exactly.
I thought that they really understood what they're doing, and they were in a defensive, apologetic mode, which was not totally warranted. Partially warranted, but they are doing something. It's not 2 years away. It's much closer than that at this point.
I always want to call that the cookie cutter approach. You know, you acknowledge, you say the question, you apologize profusely.
Yeah, right.
But then once you're done with that, let's get accountability to the people.
Right.
Hey, you know what? If you didn't do the job, I'll find somebody else to do it. Whether it's inside or outside.
There's one really bright spot, because several companies got up and complimented EDCO on their ability to intervene and help out on different things. EDCO is a real resource, and I'll tell you, Elizabeth is extremely knowledgeable. I've had the opportunity of interviewing and working with her several times in the last month, and she is a ringer. She's very good for the city.
No, it's very much so. And so there was an applause, if I remember, because we captured it on KUI TV. Again, once I'm more educated and enlightened, I don't know if I'm smarter, but thank you very much, George. But this is Peter Godinez with the Time of George and KUI TV. Until next time.